morning, everyone. Stand up, it's starting. So, first question to you. How many of you already work with Kubernetes? Please raise your hand. Not so many people. Okay, anyway. Okay. How many of you knows, do some stuff with security, try to implement security environment and all of this stuff? Okay. I believe you will find today something very interesting because I'm going to speak about security and Dennis after me is going to speak about in general about security. So before I start my presentation, I want to share it with you what kind of material I'm going to use, because sometimes when I speak about Kubernetes security, it's very important to understand it's super related to AWS, or it can be applied to other environment, for example, in your on-prem, or for example, in other, I don't know, maybe other providers. I hope you don't use other providers, but anyway. So my deck today prepared based almost, I would say, 80–90% based on the certification. It's certified Kubernetes Security, which I passed in this year in April. And honestly, it was a huge challenge for me because it required a lot of hands-on experience. You have to do almost everything by your hand and all of the stuff. And so if you are going to prepare for the same certification, I think you will find this deck very, very informative because you'll find some, some insights and how to pass this certification also. So, but before we start exactly to speak about security insight in Kubernetes, let's speak a little bit about Kubernetes because not all of you raised the hand and said, hey, I know what exactly Kubernetes. So what is Kubernetes is and why people prefer it to Kubernetes? In general, if you look at the industry, currently Kubernetes is standard de facto if you want to work with containers. If you need to make some orchestration of containers, Kubernetes will be your choice. People like CNCF, I hope you know what is CNCF. CNCF, it's a big organization. They hosted a lot of open source projects and make an umbrella. And Kubernetes also is open source. What they did, they asked people why people prefer Kubernetes, and many different reasons. So one of them is said it's open source, it's open, we can use it as we want. So for example, inside in a premise or maybe in the cloud and so on. Some of them it can be very quickly and start to use, fast deployment, scalability, and all of the stuff. So many people love Kubernetes. I'm a big fan of Kubernetes. If you're familiar with my podcast, with my YouTube channels and all of the stuff, you know how I love Kubernetes. But let's look, like a typical situation. What's exactly happened when we start to work with Kubernetes? Okay, one of the person, for example, Viktor in the company said, hey, we are going to the Kubernetes. Let's deploy our first cluster. Great, it's easy, it's super fast. Let's deploy some containers in our pods. Hey, here we go, we have our applications, looks good, everything works correctly. Next team come and said, hey, we need another Kubernetes cluster. Why? Because we want to deploy also inside the Kubernetes. Let's do it again, and we have more clusters. But it's only dev environment. And when we want to move to the next environment, what we should do, we have to create a new layer. More Kubernetes cluster needs, yeah? So, and also we need to set up all of them connections because it's service teams. And here we go, we have I would say, it's very difficult to understand what's going on, but it's not a problem of the Kubernetes. The problem currently is how to make all of this stuff secure. Because as much connections we have, as much instances we have, it's more place where we can have a problem. It's more place where you can find some vulnerabilities, some problems. So it's a big problem. It's not like a big challenge to make it secure. And you would say okay, maybe it's only in Viktor environments so many Kubernetes clusters. Let's look at the official statistics. I will try to do my magic. Here we go. Guys from VMware in 2022, again, made some research and asked people, how many clusters do you have in your organization? And look what we have. In 2020, people said more than 50 clusters, only 15%. looks good, but what happened in 2022? Exactly after COVID, exactly after when we back to offline, 30%, 2 times more. And if you look at another one, 5 or less clusters, in 2020 it was 30%, and in 2022 only 12%. Again, 3 times less, 2 times less compared to 2020. It's from 2022. I understand it's a little bit old information, but what I currently see, and based on conversation with the customers currently, I would say, stop growing of amount of Kubernetes cluster, but started to extend and make this cluster bigger. So, but anyway, many clusters exist in environment, and if you have ever tried to deploy EC2 instance and publish SSH port publicly, what will happen during the next 10 minutes? Who knows? EC2 instance, AWS, public SSH. Port scanning, so somebody want to check that I can log into your environment. Exactly the same can happen with Kubernetes cluster. So based on the, again, latest data, what we have, 3 times, or I prefer to say in percentage, 331%, growing of number of Kubernetes cluster which publicly available. I mean, we remember Kubernetes consists of 2 parts, control plane and our working nodes. Control plane is how we manage, how we work with our Kubernetes cluster, how we deploy everything, and how we communicate with Kubernetes cluster. And you know what will happen if you publish your Kubernetes cluster? Just in 20-22 minutes, somebody will come to you and try to check that you have maybe, or maybe you don't have some problems. Maybe you open something, provide anonymous access, for example, or you have not provided the right permissions and all of the stuff. So we understand why we need to do security for our Kubernetes. Cool. I want to finish this introduction with very, very famous person. I hope you know who is this guy. It's our CTO. It's Werner Vogel, but if you don't know who exactly he is, CTO of Amazon. Let me explain what is CTO of Amazon. I'm working for AWS, you see on my t-shirt. So AWS, it's like this company based on Amazon. Amazon is this company. So he's CTO of Amazon, not of AWS. So, and Werner Vogel said, security is a top priority. For us inside in AWS, when we create anything, we try to make sure it's super secure. And if you ever try to deploy Kubernetes cluster by default, I believe you're familiar that vanilla Kubernetes is not so secure as we prefer to see on the production. We need to do some stuff to make sure that Kubernetes is secure. So, first of all, I want to start with shared responsibilities. I will make some reference to Dennis' talk today. He will continue to speak about shared responsibilities. Anyway, when you deploy anything to AWS, you share responsibility because AWS provide for you infrastructure, provide for you resources. But how you use these resources, how you configure these resources, it's 100% depends on you. So when we speak about Kubernetes cluster, exists three options how we can do it. The first one, you deploy EKS, for example. I know the guy from the first line prefer to use ECS, but I'm a big fan of EKS. So if we want to deploy EKS, what kind of options do we have? The first one, it's self-managed workers. And what will happen in this situation? This is control plane, where we have our API, scheduler, etcd, this stuff, 100% responsibility of AWS. But what everything happens on working nodes, especially we speak about configuration of operation system, kubelet, CRI, container runtime interface, all of the stuff, it's your responsibility. You're responsible to make sure that you don't have some security problems inside these working nodes. When we move to the next options of deployment, it will be managed node groups. And in this situation, you see more blue color in this slide. And operation system, kubelet, runtime interface, again, it's responsibility of AWS. Another option, and we will see more blue color on the slide, it's Fargate. and inside in Fargate, we also responsible for node scaling. But what exactly Fargate provide for us as benefits from security perspective? My first question, again, like not first question, but again, question to you. You know, like when I work for EPAM, if you're familiar with my career, you remember that I worked for EPAM for a very long time. And I interviewed, I don't know, thousands of people. And my, I would say, favorite question was, what's the difference between virtual machine and container? Who can explain?
Basically Linux providing isolation, lightweight isolation for the processes, and it's like
so what's let's speak maybe step back. So if we say like containers, it's a process, yes?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. What's the difference between containers as a process and virtual machine?
Virtual machine is basically bootstrapping full virtual machine, full operating system. For container, it's using host operating system capabilities.
Exactly. So when we work with containers, we run many containers inside one virtual machine. It means like we use the same host operation system. And what does exactly it mean? Like we use the same kernel. It's a kernel of our Linux or system where we run these containers. It's very, very important because inside in the containers we make some, you know, like escalation of privileges and make, for example, privileges for made privileges mode for containers. This means like my container will be root of the whole host, and it's a huge problem if we speak from security perspective. So what Fargate provide for us? First of all, we run like patching operation system, Kubernetes, CRI, all of the stuff by AWS. The next one, what is very important, what we do, it's isolation. Isolation means like when you run anything inside in these containers, no way to go to the host and make something inside the host and, for example, send some information to in another containers. It's the same stuff what we do with virtual machines, because when you run virtual machines, it's a big, we upload all of our drivers, everything required for real virtual machine, but we provide very good isolation. The same stuff happened with Fargate, so every containers will run in separate like virtual machine isolation. And the last one, so no runtime access for user by SSH, so it's a good option also to block it in your environment. That's my recommendation will be. So we spoke about shared responsibility, but let's speak what you have to do, what you should do as soon as you deploy your first Kubernetes cluster. And first of all, it's manage access to your Kubernetes cluster. And my first recommendation, please never, ever provide for everyone, for all of your developers, root access, master access, doesn't matter how to call it. Inside in Kubernetes API, the group is called System Masters. Please don't do it, because in this situation, you provide that 100% permissions for the whole Kubernetes cluster for everyone. And it can be a big problem inside in your Kubernetes cluster. So, but what you can do inside in AWS, how you can manage, for example, developer from one team, developer from another team, I don't know, QA, for example, DevOps engineer, maybe someone else, how we can manage access. So inside in AWS, we can do it through the IAM. IAM, I believe Dennis will speak more about IAM. I will very quickly to explain what will happen. So, for example, me, I am based on this very nice laptop, try to log into my Kubernetes cluster. And we send to verify this AWS identity to IAM, it's our step 2, back to our cluster. Based on RBAC inside in Kubernetes cluster, we understood, do we have the right permission to get this access to namespace, for example, with secrets, service accounts, and all of the stuff, and send, allow or denied to our user, to our kubectl, to my laptop. And again, if you know me, you know like how I like to do some demo, because in my opinion, Dex, its slides, it's very great. But if you can show something, it will be much, much more interactive and interesting. Community Day, it's our schedule, if you forgot. Let me, first of all, how I can do it. Here we go, 1, 2, 3, good. So, I'm going to turn on my amazing mouse. So what we have, I prepared for us today 2 clusters. Let's maybe make it a little bit bigger. Here we go. We have 2 clusters, Armenia cluster 01, this one, and this cluster what I'm going to use, but what's kind of the goal? So let me demonstrate. You see from, let me make maybe a little bit, no, here we go, clear. So it's my Irvan user and Viktor user from left side and right side, different people. Let's double check this is a real different people. So I try to check that's how I log in through the EAM to my AWS account. I try to get identity, and we will see, yeah, it's Irvan user, good. And from this side, it's Viktor. Let's do the same stuff, just STS. Here we go. It's Viktor, Computer. I'm a big fan of Computer. Recently we announced version 1, production ready. Here we go. So what I want to do, let's see, from left side, for you it's right side, yeah? Yeah, no, it's left side. Let's try to get all of the nodes what we have on the cluster. And here we go, we have 3 nodes. Looks good. We can try to get all ports from all namespaces. How I do it, K, just in case if you're not familiar with Kubernetes, K, it's shortcut alias for kubectl. And I try to get ports minus capital A, it means like get all ports from all namespaces. Here we go. I see all of the ports inside in my Kubernetes cluster. But I want to provide access to my Irvan user. How I can do it? First of all, let's check that I don't have access. Let's do the same stuff. I must be logged in. So let's back to console and what's how we previously did, how we managed access to Kubernetes cluster before end of 2023. We have to manage config map, which is called aus something. I don't remember exactly, because honestly, when AWS released this great functionality, I 100% forget about that. So what we can do it currently, I inside in my Kubernetes cluster, you see Armenia cluster 01, go to access. And inside in access, you see my authentication mode. It's EKS API and config map. Config map, it's, I would say, legacy, how you previously managed, or if you still have the same configuration, maybe you're familiar with this config map, but I currently deploy this Kubernetes cluster and enable EKS API with config map. And we have some EAM access entities. Let's try to add my Irvan user to this cluster and try to search Irvan user. Here we go, it's my user. Everything I just leave by default. Access policy. I mentioned and I said, like, please never ever provide access as a master, like root access, but it's a demo, it's not production. And for demo reason, I'm going to say, hey, let's provide access for the whole cluster admin policy, just to demonstrate how we very quickly to provide access for our user. But as you can see, first of all, from the policy name and access scope, we have capability to provide access for the cluster. It's a good, and also for Kubernetes namespaces. It's amazing because in this situation we can create multiple different users and say this user working with namespace dev, and this is guys from dev development team and so on. So, but just like for demo reason, I use cluster access scope and cluster admin policy. Next, and create. Here we go. So what we currently see inside in EAM access entries, we have our Irvan user, and let's back to our terminal and try to do the same stuff just to get nodes from our Kubernetes cluster. And here we go. That's it. So this is how quickly and easily you can manage access to your Kubernetes cluster. You have all of the users inside in EAM, and currently through the AWS console, you can provide access to right users to the right resources. For backup reason, I made a video, but like as we have good internet connections, let's keep it. This is how we manage access to our Kubernetes cluster. But we deploy something to Kubernetes cluster. You remember when I showed the story, some guy from our team decided, hey, let's deploy some Kubernetes cluster, and for sure we need to deploy some pods. And these pods, most probably, I would say, maybe 99% will communicate with external board. And for example, I need to communicate with RDS or with Elasticache, or most probably again, maybe with S3 bucket. So this means like my container, my pod need access to another AWS services. How we can do it? So if you're familiar with AWS, we can assign EAM role for the whole EC2 instance, but it's a very wrong approach. Currently, I would say we have two main options. The first one is IRSA. Again, it's very terrible and very difficult to do it. Let me turn off my, again. Yeah, IRSA, it's a very great tool, but it's very hard to start to work with it. So OIDC provider, for every Kubernetes cluster, you need different roles and so on. And again, in 2023, during the reInvent, we announced amazing functionality, which is called EKS pod identity. What this means, like we currently can assign for every pod our EAM role. And how it works, like it's super easy. Again, I'm not going to show a demo because it takes some time, but like, trust me, it's very, very easy and very quickly to do it. So first of all, you have to install as add-on inside in your Kubernetes cluster. Let me very quickly to show how it looks like. So for example, I'm back to my Kubernetes cluster. Here we go, inside in add-ons, we have some add-ons already installed. And for example, if I want to get more, so pod identity, just select this pod identity agent install. It will be like a daemon set inside in your Kubernetes cluster, and that's it. And what you can do, so when you deploy this add-on in your Kubernetes cluster, you will be able to select EAM role, what's the Kubernetes namespace, and what's the service account. You remember when you work with the pods, we can assign to the pod service account. This means like how my pod will authenticate what kind of permission my pod will have. And in these connections, it means like my service account connected to the role inside in the AWS, and we provide the right permission. So what does this means? I can have two clusters, for example, yellow and blue, and based on from which cluster I made the connections, from which service account I made the connection, I can create only one role and provide access to different secrets inside my secret manager. So for example, for yellow cluster, we have access to yellow secrets. For blue cluster, I can have access only to blue secrets. It's how easy and quickly you can manage access from pods to other resources inside in AWS. Good. So what's we done? First of all, we manage access to our Kubernetes cluster, and also we manage how we can connect from our Kubernetes cluster to other AWS resources. What will be the next step? The next step, it will be to manage our hosts, making secure containers and runtime. So how we can do it? First of all, regarding the host security, please use, I would say, a recommended operation system. From AWS, we highly recommend to use Amazon Linux and BattleRocket. It's fully optimized to operation system. In BattleRocket, you will not be able to log in through the SSH, so it means like we remove these options of vulnerabilities. Also, if you are not a big fan of this operation system, we have other options for you. I know like Rancher, for example, OS, please go ahead to use it, but try to use optimized operation system for working nodes. The next one, deploy your working node in private network. So in AWS, you can publish publicly, so it means like from internet we can have access, but for working nodes, I totally understand when you do it for control plane. I understand, but I don't understand when people deploy working nodes inside in public network. Do it only in private subnet. Immutable infrastructure. Again, just to make sure that you continue listening to me, what's exactly immutable? Who can explain to me? You already answered. Let's try another person. Go ahead. Immutable infrastructure. I believe this term appeared like maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's interesting part that VM approach you mentioned before. It's usually mutable. It means it changes. Start microphone. Okay. Yeah. So immutable, basically, you create a container. Put everything in there and start working with it. Yes. So
Okay.
deploy to the cluster.
Okay.
And for mutable, it's like a virtual machine. It is going to be changed, and you are going to using hands-on or Ansible and going to change all the configuration. So
Okay.
yeah. And for immutable, the best part is that you can kill it and recreate it every time. Yes. For immutable, it's like the state of the art.
Yes, yes. So let me very quickly to summarize what's exactly immutable. You can make update of your configuration. Like we have a new patch of security. You made this patch inside an operation system. But with immutable infrastructure, it means like you do not patch. You create from the scratch. Put everything what you needed for the configuration, and in this case, you will avoid configuration drift, because when we do this constantly update of version inside in one operation system, we can be in situations that something wrong, but we don't understand why this happened. So immutable infrastructure, it's a very best practices, not only related of security inside in the Kubernetes in general. If you work with infrastructure, doesn't matter where, AWS or on-premise, immutable is a very good approach. Run Amazon Inspector. So Amazon Inspector can help you to, investigate, look inside in your Kubernetes configuration, your working nodes, and said what can be a problem. Or for example, you can run Kubebench. It will again like scan your configuration and provide for you some best practices and recommendation what you can do. So it was a host. What about our containers? So first of all, scan your containers with with security. So what kind of scans exist? So first of all, if you upload your container image inside in ECR container registry, it can do it automatically. But you can use some open source. My, for example, favorite tool for this reason will be Trivi. Very great tool, super easy to use. So highly recommend. Make small, slim your image. Again, what's the difference between virtual machine and container that's inside a virtual machine? We upload everything, but it's not needed for our containers. We have to do our container as small as possible, because when we put something inside in our containers, we create additional surface of attack. So this means like we have to be worried about this configuration, about these problems inside of the Kubernetes. I mean, like from security perspective, sorry. Always not run none as root user. Again, don't provide system master for your developers, and don't run your containers as root user. Again, make a reference what's the difference with virtual machine. If you run as root, it means like you have access to your host image, to host operation system, and you can do other stuff. Kill other containers, connect to other containers, like almost everything. Don't forget to link your Docker files. And the last one, but it's super challenge in nowadays, it's supply chain. I can share it with you multiple story what happened in open source. What's exactly supply chains? We currently depends on multiple libraries. For example, if you from front-end, I know these two guys from Uzbekistan as front-end guys, they really like NPM, but if you want to run some front-end application with NPM, first time in my experience when I tried to run some JavaScript application, I thought maybe I download the whole internet to my local machine, depending on the dependencies, yes? So this is exactly what is supply chain. So we try to avoid the situation that we, like download libraries which is not needed. We download some dependencies which is not needed inside in our containers, inside in our application. It's supply chain. If it's open source, it doesn't mean like it's secure. You have to be worried about that also. What about pod? So we spoke about host containers, but what about pod? There will be, I would say, almost the same recommendation. Deny root access for pod. Privileges escalation. Drop Linux capabilities. So for example, Linux capabilities, again, is super related to virtual machine. Through the Linux capabilities, you can have to manage, for example, a network configuration. And in this situation, you can drop, for example, some network packets. So it can be a problem if you drop some network packets for other, for example, pods or other application. Deny mounting host pass. And we're moving on. So auditing and logging. So like it will be super, like I will be as a captain. Please monitor your infrastructure. Please monitor what's really happened inside in your Kubernetes cluster. From monitoring perspective, AWS proposed CloudWatch. Great tool, but again, I prefer to use, for example, Prometheus, and Prometheus also it's managed from AWS. You don't need it to set up and configure it manually. It's managed resources, and it will be much cheaper if you have like 50 clusters inside in your environment. But also my recommendation will be, don't forget to check CloudTrail, what's happened inside in your configuration from AWS perspective, who manage your EKS cluster. Logging. Logging is very also important. Highly recommend to look inside your control plane logging, what's really happened, because based on these logs, you can identify that maybe you have some problem, maybe someone tried to log into your Kubernetes cluster. It's exactly how you can understand what's really happened. So again, from AWS, it will be recommendation CloudWatch, but today I want to focus on guard duty. Dennis also is going to mention something about guard duty, but I want to demonstrate how it works like in a few seconds. Also, you can collect all of your logs, use some open source products, like for example, FluentBit, install or Yelka. So again, like up to you. Also, don't forget to collect VPC flow logs. It can be, it can take huge amount of the size, but sometimes you can find, like connections between what's happened with your Kubernetes cluster from VPC logs. And demo 2. So this is demo, like it's live demo. I want to say I apologize just in case if something happened wrong, but I will do my best. So again, what we have? Let me turn off my amazing. We have the second cluster, Armenia cluster 2, and also I already enabled guard duty. Here we go. We have guard duty currently based on summary. You see, I don't have some findings. So like currently is everything looks good. My 2 Kubernetes cluster configured correctly. So sounds good. How exactly I enabled guard duty for my Kubernetes cluster? Again, it's super easy. You just need to enable audit logs monitoring is enabled. And also inside in runtime, I enabled for my EKS. Here we go. You see it's agent installed in my EKS cluster. Again, it's managed by AWS. It will be daemon set inside in your Kubernetes cluster and check your runtime, your configuration, and all of the stuff. So let's back to the findings. 0 findings. Cool. So logging, please. Here we go. So it's my second demo. And I'm going to do some stuff currently. It's K again, just like remind you, K it's kubectl, apply -f, and just dot. It means like I will apply all manifests from the current folder. Let's do it, and we will look at our manifest. So the first one, who can say what's wrong with this manifest? What's wrong with this resource inside Kubernetes cluster? Exactly. Thank you very much. You was very fast. So what's really happened? You see, I provide access for anonymous. I assigned as a cluster role just a view, but it's anonymous. So everyone without authentication can see what's inside in my Kubernetes cluster. So it's cluster role binding, so it means like everyone can have access to my Kubernetes cluster. The next manifest, what's wrong with this one? It's also a cluster role binding, but what's wrong? Cluster admin, but what's wrong? I said like don't provide access to cluster admin for everyone, but what's wrong exactly with this? Default. Yes. Here we go. We have service account. which is currently is default. And if you're familiar with Kubernetes, you remember that's for if you don't assign any service account for your pod, by default it will be default service account. And what exactly happened here? I provide for default service account cluster admin. It means like all pods currently will be with cluster admin access. So it's super wrong. And the last one, I understand it can be hard to read because there is a little bit more information, but I believe what? Replaced by one host mount pass to, as you can see, yes, it's one problem. What's another one? Privilege is true. Yes, privilege is true. It's this line number 19. And the last one, the problem is related to volume mount. I mounted to test PD, but what exactly I mount? I mount host system with the path etc. And if you're familiar with Linux, you know that we store almost all of the configurations, almost everything what is sensitive inside in this folder inside in our Linux operation system. And let's look how GuardDuty try to find these problems, find these findings. Finger crossed, I hope everything will work. So it's just live demo, guys. It's not should be real time, just as I said, please. Here we go. We have 4 problems and exactly what we said. Like the first one, anonymous access granted. You see, it's high severity. And from the right side, I hope for you it's also right. Just like as you see from the other tab, we have some detailed information, where it's happened, what's the account ID, what's the cluster, everything. Admin access to default service account. Again, we found it. We have all of the configurations. Sensitive mount. Again, it's medium, but again, it can be a problem. And privileged container. So GuardDuty just scanned all of our configuration inside the Kubernetes cluster. As you can see, not like real time, because based on my experience, it takes like 1 to 3 minutes to scan it and provide this feedback to you. I know some questions. It provides some recommendations how to fix it. So you can investigate with detective. Detective is like true detective, and detective can help you to provide some information how to fix it and what you should do to configure to make it more secure. Okay, turn off this microphone and back to our deck. Again, some video, but we don't need it. The next one, encryption. Secrets, it's a very important part of Kubernetes, but again, ask to you, the guys, what's the difference between config map and secret by default? I know that you know. I want to ask someone else. This guy from AWS, don't please say anything. Who else know what's the difference between config map? Here we go, okay. Yes, exactly. Thank you very much. What's exactly base 64? It means like I can encode to 64, but I also able to decode from base 64 to like plain text. It means like when we work with config map and secret by default, not so big difference in reality. What we should do just to make sure that we secure our secrets. So we need to provide some mechanism or like line how to encrypt our secrets inside in etcd. It's our data where we like database where we store all of our information and all of the stuff. So what kind of options exist in, to make secure? So first of all, my recommendation will be store your secret outside of Kubernetes cluster. It also can be possible, but you don't want to do it. Use KMS to encrypt your secrets. So use a KMS, you create this like secret line, and based on the secret line, you can encrypt your secret. But let me turn off my mouse. Just a second. Here we go. Yeah. As I said, like I highly recommend to store your secret outside of Kubernetes. What the options do we have? So we have parameter store and secret manager. What's the big difference? Dennis will explain in more details and said what I don't prefer to say. So in general, if we look from technical perspective, So parameter store, it's static. I mean, it's like you will not able to make a rotation of your secret, but with secret manager, you're able to, so it means like you can update your secret value dynamically. So for example, every 6 months, new password for your database. So from secret manager, you can do it. How to get your secrets for Kubernetes? So super easy. You just create your secret, like for example through the CLI, AWS Secret Manager, create secret, blah blah blah, secret string, region, and inside it Kubernetes, you just like create environment. So environment variable. So here we go. We have endpoint value. This one. What's the region? What's the location? Blah blah blah. Secret name. Secret name. This one. So we get the secret name, secret value from our secret manager. Additional security best practices. So I have to almost finish. So security best practices, additional. My first recommendation, please try to make your Kubernetes cluster in private subnet. When I said in private subnet, I mean like both part, control plane and working node. I understand sometimes it can be challengeable. I would say like it's very difficult to connect to your control plane, but what we can do, Bastion host, we can make a VPN, all of the stuff. But when you isolate and don't provide access publicly for your control plane, and you remember my, like on the start of my presentation, I shared 22 minutes, and somebody will try to check your configuration of Kubernetes cluster. So try to avoid use public internet, just in case if you cannot provide like access security group, something like that, who can access from which IP addresses. It's not a big problem. And also make some connections like from inside, like endpoints and so on inside in your working nodes. Another one, I know it's a huge line of the text, but let me highlight it what's in the most important. I would say, first of all, you have to understand that Kubernetes, inside of the Kubernetes, we have namespace. Namespace don't provide for you isolation. Namespace is just a logical combination, like a logical part of your resources. So you create a namespace and put like pods, service accounts, secrets, config map, services, all of the stuff, but it's not isolated. So what you should do, first of all, manage your bug, who can access to your namespace, specific namespace. And the last one, not the last one, almost the last one, create network policy. When you do network policy, it means like you isolate based from network connections from one namespace to another one. So by default, when you deploy namespace A, for example, and namespace B, pods from base namespaces able to connect between each other. So I was in a situation when we have in the same cluster different environment, staging environment and production, and when we deploy something to the staging environment, we forgot to make this, like a network policy, and the guys from staging make a connection to production database. And I believe you understand what's happened. So what else? You can configure it quality of the service. It's also a very important part, how you provide resources for your Kubernetes, for your pods. Some additional policy like gatekeeper. Some people know it's like OPA and so on. And use isolation like VM isolation, like using FortiGate, because when you isolate your pod, like virtual machines, means like nobody will be able to connect to the host system and do some stuff with host system. I understood it's a lot. So, like when I prepared for CK, like Kubernetes Security exam, it took a lot of time for me. And I would say highly, highly recommend. The first link from left side for you, yes, from the left side, it's a workshop where you can find my demo, what I showed today. You can find also very great, like I would say amazing documentation. It's not in official AWS site, it's like a little bit separately. It's a best practices from EKS team, service team, but they also have like a part of security. They prepared, like I would say, super great, everything in one place. If you understand Russian, as you understood from my accent, you know like I'm speaking Russian, highly recommend this video where we together with Viktor review. So who is Viktor? Not me, I mean like this guy. So it's also community builder. And what this guy did, so he created a simulator for Kubernetes exams, all of the Kubernetes exams. So you can run this simulator inside in AWS and try your, like, make sure that you prepared enough to pass the certification. Highly recommend to look at it. And thank you very much. The last call to you will be, you know, like inside an AWS, we really prefer to listen to your feedbacks. And I know a lot of stories that when we create some services, like for example, CDK, other services based on customer feedbacks. So if you can share your feedbacks, for me it will be very good signal that what I do on the right way, maybe it was not enough demo, maybe it was not enough deep dive technical, maybe it was too deep dive and so on. Please take your time, like maybe 30 seconds and leave feedback. And super happy to answer your questions if you have. We have 5 minutes before Dennis will come to the stage. If you have any questions, please. If not, we have one question. At least we have one question. We have one question.
I would like to ask, do we have built-in support for scanning already running images in Kubernetes, in EKS basically, like, because for scanning images which are in registry is different things, and scanning images which are already running is different thing. Thanks.
Just to repeat your question, make sure that I understood correctly. So you ask, can we scan images what's already run inside my Kubernetes cluster, not what I store in? Yeah. Oh, it's a good question, honestly, because what I saw most of the implementation, you have to do it before you deploy anything to Kubernetes cluster. So for example, ECR, when you store in ECR, it's do it automatically. You can run through the 3V. So maybe, but honestly, I'm not sure that maybe some open source tools can scan your current configurations and provide for you, hey, in these images, you have some issues and so on. But my recommendation was like when you create your own container image, what you should do before you upload and push it to container registry, like ECR or another one, you have to scan it based on security best practices. That's true, but it can be different. Like you upload something one, but in the reality you run something else. By default, ECR, for example, provides this functionality. So it means like it can be constantly scanning your containers. So it will provide for you the information, hey, today we found some security problem inside in this container. Please take a look and make sure that you update to the latest version some part of this container. We have another question, one more. Here we go.
That was a really great talk. Thank you very much. You mentioned that you should deploy the Kubernetes cluster inside a private subnet.
Yes.
Which is a great recommendation. I was wondering what your recommendation if you need anything running in the pods to access the outside, or if you need to access the control cluster. How are you doing those?
When you pod need to access to some in other resources, what you can do it, for example, through the private link. But also, if you need to connect to the public internet, NAT gateway, it's option. So it means like you will go through the NAT gateway in your network configuration and make this connection to external like API or other public internet connections. How to connect to the control plane and all of the stuff, VPN, one option. Another one, some Bastion host. So when you log in through the SSH to one Bastion host and do some stuff with other configurations and like with your control plane and working nodes if needed. But honestly, I don't see any reason for working nodes to have access from public internet. I mean, like, please make sure that you understand correctly. Ingress, like when you connect from public to our working node, it's ingress. But egress, when we want to connect to the internet, we have to block only inside, like ingress connections. But egress, we can allow and provide access like from the internet gateway, not gateway, depends of your configuration. I think that's it. If you have any questions, like I will stay here for the whole day. I will be on the workshops. We have great workshops related to also EKS, GitOps approach with Argo CD and all of the stuff. And if you have any questions, we'll be very happy to answer them. And thank you very much.